Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology. Today, I'm hanging out with my friend Kat from the creativeintrovert.com. Kat is my social media manager. That's a good way of talking about what she does. She helps me every day to do a lot of things on social media, including formatting, editing, putting out all the content, my newsletters. She also aggregates questions from all of you throughout the year, and then we do these fun Q&A episodes. Kat also has her own creative work, too, at the creativeintrovert.com, which I highly recommend that you all check out. So I'm very glad to have Kat here again today. Before I dive in, before Kat opens us up for the day, I want to remind everybody that I am fundraising for the last weeks of the year here in supporting my work as an astrologer in 2021, where we are trying to gain the support of 691 backers. I beat last year's record. You can pick up when you donate. You can find the link to donate, by the way, in the comments section of this post or in the description of the video. And when you donate, you can pick up a variety of different reward readings that I offer and different bonus content that's exclusive to the Kickstarter. Half off all my programs in 2021, my training courses and things like that. So check that out. Appreciate your support. All right, Kat, thanks for being here again today. What are we diving into today?
So, today we're going to be talking about astrology as a spiritual practice, which is something you mention in quite a lot of your videos. So, I guess my first question is, what is a spiritual practice to you?
Yeah. So I think it looks, there's so many different traditions on this planet. And there's a book. Actually, let me grab it. I'm going to pause for a second. Okay, I got it. So there's a book that I really like. In this, I feel like the popular phrase is "I'm spiritual, not religious." Right? Like that's like, how do you identify yourself? I don't belong to a religion. I don't like institutions. I'm spiritual, not religious. There's a Jungian therapist that I know named Jason Smith, and he wrote a book called "Religious but Not Religious." And the subtitle is Living a Symbolic Life. It is a brilliant book. And I think the view that most closely resembles my own when it comes to what spiritual life is. And I'm a little bit more prone to saying that it can't just be spiritual, it has to be religious. But I also want to qualify that, as he does throughout this book, by saying we just have to understand what a religious life is, as opposed to a religious institution. So, for example, oftentimes when people say, and this is my experience of owning a yoga studio for 10 years and so forth, people say I'm spiritual, not religious, which means I'm interested in spiritual subject matters. Maybe I'm exploring what is real or true about life or the soul or the afterlife, or I'm interested in altered states of consciousness, or I'm, basically like I'm a seeker. But oftentimes the spiritual, not religious movement, if we want to call it that, reflects a non-committedness, meaning I'm not really committed to anything. And there's the sense that if I am committed to anything, then I will become closed-minded, dogmatic, fundamentalist, zealous, etc. And a lot of times that's understandable because it's come from a background where someone has probably been hurt by those exact things. It's people who are zealous, fundamentalists, condemning, and say you can't be spiritual unless you do this all the time, and it becomes really like legalistic. So understandably, this phrase spiritual, not religious comes about, but there's also problems that exist with the word religion that I think need to be looked at really carefully in order to restore something that's missing from just that kind of maybe something of the apathy or blandness of the spiritual, not religious thing. So anyway, the word, like this book explains very well, the word religion means, looking at the Latin, religio, which means to reconnect something that's been severed or cut, like tendons or ligaments in the body. Yoga means the exact same thing. It means to yoke. Religion is not something you belong to. Religion is an activity. It's an activity of reconnecting something that we get separated from. Some people would understand that as God. Some people would understand that as source or the universe. Some people would understand that as you're just getting disconnected from your own higher self or your own true nature. I know what it feels like, and I think everybody knows what it feels like to walk around the world and feel disconnected or out of alignment somehow. And I think that what it means to live a spiritual life is very similar to what it means to live a religious life, not to belong to a religion, but to live your life religiously. And what I mean by that is that real spiritual practices are ones that recognize I tend to feel disconnected or get disconnected from my best self, or from, if you want to go further theologically, from God in my heart, or however a person, may, there's lots of different, um, views that a person might have about this. But I think that a spiritual practice boils down to, it has to be consistent. It has to be done with some degree of devotion over a long period of time for one to really receive the benefits and to feel more consistently centered and connected. Connected to what? Let's leave that open-ended for now, but let's just say that you can't just have this kind of bland, like, I'm interested in spiritual life, but I have no consistent practice. And so that's what I love about this book, Religious but Not Religious, which means living a symbolic life. And it really is a book that's talking about the importance of living with the daily practices that connect us, that reconnect us, that bring us back to our center. And that if you don't have those every single day, you tend to fall apart. And saying I'm into spiritual stuff, I'm not religious, is not good enough. You're not going to get the reward, the benefits, or you're not going to actually experience the growth personally without some degree of yoking yourself daily. Religion, in other words, is not an institution, it's a way of life. To be religious is in a sense to be someone who every single day prioritizes staying connected, staying aligned, staying in your center. And you could use a variety of different tools or practices that you're committed to, but they're tools. They're tools that are there to reconnect you. And when people glom onto the tools, that's when they become religious in ways that we end up saying, well, I don't want that. But then again, we can swing in the opposite direction and think, well, I don't need anything. I'm spiritual. Yeah, I totally think all spiritual things are valid. But unless that religious dimension of practice and commitment is there, it often doesn't really do much for us. So that's the first way I would describe it, is saying, I get that I'm spiritual, not religious thing, but we need a little religion in our lives. And by that, I just mean consistent daily practice over a long period of time to help us stay connected.
So in defense of like the seekers out there who maybe are like dabbling in things, but are definitely game for doing something every day, and just kind of like in defense, I think if you're somebody who is like seeking truth, which I think is a valid part of this, naturally, I think there's going to be an inclination to want to try a lot of different things to find what that.
You cut out there for a second, Kat. Can you ask the question one more time?
Yeah. So my question is, let's say you've got, a lot of different options in front of you, a buffet of, religious, spiritual practices, and you're prepared to just like commit to one. But how do you pick one? Is it just a random choice? How do you do that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that first of all, like you were saying, like kind of in defense of people who may feel like they're dabbling. It's nothing. It's really not against dabbling. What I'm saying here about religion, what I'm saying is that there's a lot of people out there who identify as spiritual, not religious, but aren't actively pursuing any kinds of spiritual habits or a spiritual lifestyle or spiritual practices of any kind. And so that spiritual, not religious thing ends up becoming a defense against cultivating the kind of commitment that we need on any path in life, whether you're learning how to play a sport or an instrument, or, what, I can't think of one thing that a person would want to get better at that they don't have to kind of show up and practice with. And so when it comes to cultivating the qualities that I think religious and spiritual people are interested in, you know, peace, patience, you know, all the virtues that we want, as well as the perhaps the internal feeling of happiness that's not dependent upon, you know, what's happening in the world around us. Just we just want to feel fulfilled inside. So my point is that you can't get there unless you have a practice, and religion is often a word that more accurately describes practice, as does yoga. Now, what it is, or you know, which practices, I don't think are as important. I think that there, like you said, there's kind of a buffet of options, and I think it's very normal to go through a phase of experimenting. I'm not at all trying to police what people do or don't do, but it's important that people do something. So, for example, I any to me, a spiritual practice would be, as you're actively seeking truth, you're going to explore different traditions. Does Buddhism appeal to me? Or does this, you know, does this practice or that practice appeal to me? Does this group or that group appeal to me? And the practices will suit you or not suit you. I think it's normal for any practice to not be like a practice is a practice in part because we're not necessarily good at it or it's not entirely enjoyable. Like I don't think it's easy, in other words, to grow spiritually. So any practice probably is not going to be like a cakewalk, but it should be something that fits with us, that makes us happy, or that helps us to feel connected. Like I love chanting, I love mantra meditation. Do I love it every day? No, but you know, it's like it works for me. Um, so I think in exploring, the the important thing is to look for practices that you can bring into your life every day that are helping you to become the best version of yourself, and that are helping you to, for me, I would say, you know, part of my belief system is obviously to help you connect with source, or to connect with spirit, soul within. But what those practices are, journaling, you know, some people like to go in nature. Some people, I mean, what is it that where do you create that sanctuary every day in your life where you just take time for yourself and for tending to the inner life? And I think there's so much room for exploration in that. And I don't think people need to arrive at truth, you know, before they settle in on a practice. I think it's a, you know, it's a process. But my simple point in making this whole spiritual, not religious distinction is to say that it's the consistency of that approach over time, the consistency of the seeking in tangible daily ways, that I think leads people into something that fits and that becomes a source of spiritual companionship for a lifetime. That's, it becomes really productive and it actually does something for us, versus people who say, you know, I take a yoga class every couple of weeks, you know, maybe I read something here or there, like, and then, you know, I just kind of, I'm spiritual, not religious. And again, I'm not trying to rip on or judge anybody, but I'm just saying at some point we have to kind of move past that, to, if we really want to benefit from any kind of spiritual practice or lifestyle, we have to move into, okay, you know, what can I bring into my life on an everyday level that will help me grow, evolve as a person, experience deeper states of happiness and contentment. That stuff doesn't come by just kind of superficially liking spiritual topics.
Yeah, it's. I wonder if one of the reasons people don't want to commit to a spiritual practice is because when they try, they forget the purpose, or they didn't have a purpose to begin with. So, do you think that that's part of it, having a, you know, directed purpose for it?
Yeah, absolutely. My wife loves to do vision boards. I'm not, I'm not as into them. I always make fun of her about them, but then I begrudgingly, I end up making one and stuff like that too. But, um, I think, yeah, I mean, some people like vision boards. I don't like, you know, I'm not talking about making a vision board to get your, you know, your Ferrari or whatever, or whatever, but a vision board where it's like, this is where I'd like to see myself, you know, what the kind of growth that I want to see in myself. And I think having goals, and, you know, tangible goals that we'd like to, the ways in which we'd like to see ourselves grow. Just like if you sit down with a therapist, they say, what are your goals? You know, it's like we can do that with ourselves. And, you know, and I'm not, and I certainly wouldn't want to tell a person what the goals should be. In bhakti, the goal is, cultivating love of God, awakening of the spirit soul within, which are the sources of knowledge, bliss, happiness, etc. So, but whatever the goal is, I think it's okay to be figuring out our goals as we go. It's okay to not know where we're going. It's okay to have questions for things to develop and evolve. But I think it is helpful to develop some goals to say, what kind of person do I want to become? What do I want to discover? Some people are going to say, I want to know why I'm here, what my purpose is, or I want to know what's true, or what God is, or what reality is. Or, I mean, kind of being aware of what we want or what we're looking for helps. And then, trying to connect it to everyday practices that can help us move toward that goal. And the proof is in the pudding. After almost what for me now, I guess it's about 3 years of my sort of monastic level vows and practices that I do every day. And I had spiritual practices before then. So I've seen my own spiritual practices sort of refine and get very specific over a long period of time. But over the past 3 years, with the practices that I've sort of refined and really focused on, I see myself changing in ways that I've wanted to change. I've seen growth that, I've known this needs work. This part of me I'd like to develop. I'd like to feel more peace or whatever. And everything's not perfect in my life, but you can see the growth because you're actually testing a technology, a spiritual practice technology. And how could a person possibly identify whether they're growing or not unless they have some goals and unless they have practices or a practice or something that they're using as consistently as they're able to, and then just kind of checking in regularly and going like, is this working? And if it's not, try a new thing. And but one thing that I know is that, it takes a long time for most spiritual practices to start showing their fruits. So you can't just, they're not like, it's not like a fashion trend where we can try something on for a week and then try another thing on for another week. And then I think you have to try to search for things that you feel like I can give a year of my life to this and see how it goes. After a year, maybe I'll try meditating every day or yoga every day, or those are the ones that are familiar to me, obviously. But after a year, I'll evaluate and I'll sit down. I'll say, is this working for me? And then I might, if it's not, then I'll have given it a fair shot, and then I'll go back to the drawing board and see what other kinds of practices might be there. And along the way, it's really important to not be alone in this. To seek friends, teachers, spiritual community, people that can give us input and help us find what might be right for us. So, yeah.
Very helpful. Thank you. So now I'm just wondering about astrology. I know that for many of us, astrology has been a way into a spiritual practice. How, can astrology be used as a spiritual practice? And if so, how would that look?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a lot of what I do is telling people, how can astrology act as a spiritual practice in your life? Astrology is not inherently for everyone a spiritual practice, but how could it become that? Well, to me, and I'm not saying that my ideas about how it could become a spiritual practice are the only ones out there, but for me, the primary way in which it becomes a spiritual practice is, to me, I think it needs to be what I'm about to describe needs to be paired with some daily form of quietness, solitude, reflectiveness, meditation, some place where you can kind of empty your mind and get into a really receptive state and really take time to feel what's going on inside. If we're doing that and we're tracking the transits, wow, it's an amazing pairing, because the transits are going to be like, okay, here's the mechanics of your psychology just displayed for you every day of the week, every month, and every year. And as they go by and you're seeing them go by and you're seeing the way that you get wrapped up in them, that you respond or react to them, the choices that you make in correlation with the symbols. If you're tracking transits while also living a self-reflective lifestyle as often as you have time for, or as often as you're able to, the planets become your teachers. Every single day, the planets will give you feedback. Like okay, let's just give a simple example. If you're meditating, even say 10 minutes a day, once a day for a year, and you go through a Venus retrograde period or a Mars retrograde period like we did in 2020, your experience of that transit is going to be so much more valuable because your experiences are being processed within the spiritual dimension of your meditation practice, even if it's just 10 minutes a day. And you're going to see the planets as teachers, as reflective of unconscious patterns within your psyche, as guiding you into better decision making. You know, they can't become that, and our everyday experiences can't become that if we don't have the ability to reflect upon them. And then astrology itself, of course, is a language that allows our experiences to be something other than just the soap operas of our lives. You know, when you go through, let's say you have a blowout with someone and Mars is squaring Pluto. Yeah, there's the level of the relationship and the actual blowout that occurred, and you have to tend to that. But you're going to have a reflection on the nature of anger, on the nature of pride, on the nature of violence, on the nature of conflict and peace. You know, so many things that go from just being in the personal to becoming transpersonal, transcendental, because you have this archetypal language that's offering a mirror of for you in the midst of the experience that allows the experience to be something more than just material, something more than just personal. So having that language itself is amazing because the language itself takes you out of the cage of the ego, right? It just takes you out of it. So just alone tracking transits with astrology is like it's kind of like a gateway drug to spiritual life because it's starting to help you transcendentalize your experiences if you look at them through the lens of astrology regularly, regardless of if you meditate or not. So I think astrology spiritualizes people's lives regardless if they're practicing anything. But if you pair it with daily reflectiveness, oh my God, it's like you're getting a PhD in life. You know what I mean? So I feel like, you know, the best thing that people could do for themselves to make astrology spiritual, a part of a spiritual practice, is to pair the daily tracking of the transits, whether it's through your favorite astrology channels or it's on your own as a student, or you know, you see an astrologer maybe once a year or something like that. But whatever level of astrology you engage with, in other words, if you pair that alongside of some kind of daily reflective practice, journaling, meditation, you know, going for your walk to clear your head and just let your thoughts do what they want to do and just observing them. And if you make time for that and then pair it with astrology, it really will change your life. So that's how I think of astrology as a spiritual practice.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's a big incentive. I remember you saying quite recently that you're going to be able to understand, identify the transits a lot more if you're making that time for having a quieter mind.
Yep.
So
yeah, you become a lot more aware, the more peaceful and tranquil. I mean, think about it like this. You know, there's waves out there, right? That the planets are like waves, big waves. We have two different boats that we can be in while we experience the waves that are going to happen whether we want them or not. Just life. The planetary waves can be experienced in the boat of chaos internally, which means that we don't have a peaceful, steady center, right? In which case, the waves are already choppy, and then you're in a boat that is chaotic. So, you know, you're gonna amplify the degree to which all of those energies are experienced as chaotic. When you have a boat that you're in that's peaceful and centered, and not, I'm not saying that it's bland or neutral. It's just because you can experience any kind of emotion peacefully. I mean, this is really what's meant by this idea of the peace that passes understanding, which is something that's referenced in the New Testament. The peace that passes understanding is not one that is neutral to the world or dissociated from the world. It's being in a boat that that allows for the experiences to pass through us peacefully. You're in a boat that's not making the situation worse while you're already on the waves. If you're taking care of the vessel of your body, your mind, and the indwelling spirit is comfortable, then those experiences look and feel a lot different. And so, now let's just say you don't have a peaceful boat that you're in, right? You got a more chaotic situation. Maybe it's a boat that's not as well crafted. It's got some holes, the mast is broken, or I mean, it's kind of a wreck or something like that. Your first experience of the waves out there is like, oh my God, they're so choppy and it's so crazy. And you don't really realize that your boat has a lot to do with that. You don't even see it. And then when you start thinking, well, the waves aren't going anywhere, they really don't seem to be getting any better. But oh, look, there's a leak right there. Or oh, look, there's a hole in my sail or something like that. And you start focusing on trying to fix or adjust the boat, right? It's a weird thing, but then suddenly after you're starting to feel like, wow, my boat's feeling and looking a lot better. Then all of a sudden you look out at the waves and you go, oh, they're really beautiful. They're interesting. They're not just pummeling me. They're not just an antagonistic thing that I'm having to deal with. There's something that I'm moving through because now I have a peaceful boat. I have a good, healthy boat to move through them with. So, but the point is, and the reason why I say that a person will come to spiritual life regardless is because if you're first of all, if you're on the wind and the waves and you have no way of identifying that these winds and waves move in patterns, that they're not just about you, that they're these larger forces of nature. Like if you don't have that ability, you're going to be really overwhelmed. Astrology in the beginning tends to give people the ability, even if they're still in a really, beat up boat, that like, well, there are these forces of nature, there are these higher gods, there are the higher archetypal forces, and they're really intense. But that alone is a huge step in the right direction. And the next step is really to say, okay, but a big part of whether or not this becomes manageable has to do with whether or not I tend to the vessel. And the vessel in this case would be, on one level, the the body, the mind, etc. But it's what we're really talking about is making a hospitable place for the indwelling spirit.
So keep your boat clean is the takeaway, right?
Yeah.
That's all I've got on questions for today.
Well, that was really good. Thank you. By the way, if people are interested in, like how do I cultivate a spiritual practice, you can check out the Bhakti page on my website if you want to learn more about Bhakti yoga, which is kind of that's many of you know, that's like my spiritual trajectory in life. So go to the Bhakti page, click on the Bhakti page. You can get a free password to access a whole archive of talks on Bhakti yoga. There are a series there that I did called Easy Practices of Surrender. And one is on mantra meditation, and there's some other things too. So those could give you a starting place if you're like, yeah, I want to experiment with yoga, bhakti in particular. But whatever you do, I send out this little prayer to everyone today that you would find something that you can be devoted to every day. Get a little bit of the right kind of religion in your soul. The daily practices that reconnect you. You don't have to belong to an institution. It doesn't have to be institutional for religion to be a healing part of your life. I'm trying to sort of revitalize the beauty of that word. And I also want to recommend, again, that you check out this book, Religious But Not Religious, Living a Symbolic Life, by Jason Smith, which I think captures so much better than what I could do today in this short video. This idea about, how do we create that consistency of spiritual practice in our life if we're also feeling really averse to institutional religions, which I think very understandably a lot of people are. So I hope you guys will enjoy that book as well. Remember, my Kickstarter is running to the end of the year. If you haven't pitched in already, I would really appreciate your support, and you can pick up a reward when you do so. All right. And be sure to make sure you check out Kat's work at thecreativeintrovert.com as well. Okay. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.